My suspicion that there are fewer buses now than there were back then has been confirmed by research by the Rural Services Network that have cited that 20% of lifeline bus routes in county and rural areas have disappeared over the past 5 years. So that's a pretty alarming figure. My neighbour, who happens to be cutting my hedge today, is a gardener, his wife's a care worker, and they have 4 kids. He was telling me that his eldest, who's now at Exeter College, is having to take a bus into, well, he's having to take 2 buses actually, into Exeter and back. It's now costing him £30 a week, £120 a month, which is an awful lot of money for him and for lots of people like him. And lastly, for the past 12 years, I've been the coordinator for a voluntary community transport scheme in my village, which takes people without transport or unable to access public transport because they maybe don't have the mobility to get up to the bus stop. We take people to medical appointments, hospitals, health centres, we take them to dentists, opticians and so on. And we're part of the Devon Access to Services organisation, which Tim can talk a little more about later. We have a couple who live in social housing in the village. They're clients. He uses a mobility scooter, she's partially sighted. He's now got a 6-week program of twice-weekly appointments at Heavy Tree Hospital, which are vital to managing his health issues. Without our services providing voluntary drivers, he wouldn't be able to get to these appointments. I recently checked with Apple Taxis in Exeter. A taxi in a single trip would cost him £35. That's £70 each way, twice a week. So you can imagine that's pretty unaffordable. Getting to these appointments is absolutely essential to his staying healthy and possibly even to his staying alive. We charge for that same journey into Heavy Tree Hospital and home. We suggest a donation, which is £15, which if you took a taxi would be £70. So these are just 3 very personal examples which I hope provide a snapshot of why good access to transport is so important for those of us who are living in rural areas. And it's why I've been banging on about this issue for more years than my friends and colleagues, I think, would wish to remember. But it's so important. More broadly, and I will move away from my personal anecdotes, more broadly, evidence provided just this year to the House of Lords Social Mobility Policy Committee by the University of Exeter. And I would commend this report to you. It's called Local Roots, Lasting Change. So this is about social mobility. It identifies that lack of access to affordable transport for further and higher education limits the lifetime opportunities of young people living in rural areas. And I think back to my gardener friend and their struggle. Lack of access to transport limits young people's access and all of our access, be we old or young, to leisure activities, sports activities, cultural activities, and social activities. The things that promote good health and well-being and ultimately social inclusion. There are many more reasons why adequate bus and train services are so important, the obvious being economic. People need to get to early or late shifts, work shifts. They need to get home again from these shifts at all times of the day and evening. And sometimes they're having to get to more remote locations. They need to have the confidence that there will be a bus or a train that it will arrive on time. Inadequate transport can severely limit people's employment opportunities and their economic short and long-term well-being. The necessity of having a car when you live in a rural area has another huge impact on household budgets, if you're one of the ones that are fortunate to have a car. There's a 2023 report from the Social Market Foundation that shows that after mortgage payments, in rural communities, transport is the second largest household expense. And of course, this disproportionately can affect lower income households, not surprisingly. Not only does increased car ownership have a financial impact, we mustn't underestimate the environmental impact that it has with all of us who live in rural areas getting into the car and driving into city centres. The congestion that we now see in Exeter is one gets a sense of how it's growing. Before I introduce the question and answers, I'll leave you with, I thought, a sobering prediction from, again, the Rural Services Network, who take a wonderful overview of rural provision, lobbying, policy making, and try and influence central government. The Rural Services Network estimate or predict that 56% of small towns in the southwest have become or are at risk of becoming transport deserts, which I think is pretty shocking. So, moving on from my rant, I'd like to welcome our panel members, who it won't be personal anecdotes, they bring professional expertise, and I'm sure, I hope they will elaborate on some of the points that I've touched on. Sarah Gibbs, who's a consultant in public health, with Public Health Devon. Next to her is Chris Smith, Integrated Public Transport Manager for Devon County Council. Beyond that, Peter Knight, Managing Director of Stagecoach. And I think we must remember there are other bus service providers in Devon. We can't blame it all on Stagecoach. And Tim Laverton, Project Manager for Devon Access to Services, which our community transport scheme is a part of, and they provide a really valuable network for all of us. And Rod Birtles, who is, amongst other things, but he is DCT's representative at the table. So he's going to talk about connecting people particularly. So each will provide a 5-minute introduction. I'm really hoping that we might hear of some new initiatives which might shine a more positive light than the rather bleak picture I've painted about rural transport, not just me, the statistics as well, provide on current provision. And then we'll move to the questions that have been submitted to us. Because there were so many, we've grouped them together because several of them raise the similar sorts of issues. So they've been grouped together under headings, and these will be projected onto the screen. If we have any time at the end, we might be able to take some questions to the floor, or from the floor, not to the floor, from the floor, and I guess if you don't have an opportunity to ask your questions during this session, I hope our panelists won't mind being nabbed during tea afterwards. So that brings us to the first of our panelists, who is Sarah Gibbs with Public Health Devon.
Great, thank you so much, Renee. You've given a brilliant introduction, and I hope that some of the stuff, I think you've said all of what I'm going to say in anecdotes, really, so there you are. Oh, I don't know if you can see that. I hope what you can see, even if you can't see what's written on it, is a whole lot of blocks. There are some building blocks there, but I will come on to that. I'm going to talk about what creates health, but also how does transport affect health. So what creates health? Well, a safe, warm home, decent work, connection to community. These all play a crucial role in how healthy we are. And we like to call them the building blocks of health. But for too many people in Devon, some of these blocks are crumbling, or they might be missing altogether. And when we don't have what we need to heat our homes, or to buy healthy food, or we're always worrying about what to make ends meet, this can lead to lives being cut short. And I'll say that again, it can lead to lives being cut short and to chronic stress and to poor health. And of course, when we're unwell, then it makes it even more difficult to access those building blocks. We might not be able to work or go to school or to college or to care for our loved ones, and that then further impacts our health and the health of our families and communities. So really the message I want to say is building a healthy society is really like constructing a sturdy building. We need all the right elements in place. And one of those you can see is the transport block there. And so whilst all of these building blocks are in place, and we need all of those building blocks in place, as Nora knows, I'm very passionate about transport, because I think transport plays a particularly critical role, maybe the most critical role, because it literally connects us to these other building blocks. And so I think that is why I'm so passionate about it, and why I also wanted to just say a little bit about transport poverty and how transport poverty affects health. Because a lack of, as you said so beautifully, a lack of accessible, affordable, available, reliable, safe transport options mean that people's ability to access educational work is affected. As we know, people become very lonely or isolated, and not able to see friends and family, not even when we're in beautiful places, not able to access those beautiful places. So not being able to access these building blocks can very much impact our health. So health is not really the NHS, it is all of those things that we've just talked about, and transport is actually a fundamental piece of that picture. So, but you know all of that because your questions are absolutely brilliant and have highlighted all of that through the questions. So I just want to say a little bit more hopeful. But what we're trying to do about that is that we are trying to, with Nora, with DCT and with other voluntary sector organisations and with County Council, the NHS, we are trying to work together with the Peninsula Transport Group. We're trying to work together to shine a light onto transport and transport poverty, and particularly rural transport issues. And so what we're trying to do is make really clear a measure of transport poverty, so that when these plans come out and you've got a bus improvement plan, or you've got a cycling walking plan, or you've got your big plans, that they can be looked at through the lens of transport poverty, and decisions can be made about where investment is most needed on the basis of where people most need it. And bringing that, so your social mobility point is very well taken, because that's really vital, so that people have access to that. The final thing to say is that the combined county authority is the first rural combined authority in England, and they are going to be from April. From April, I think they are going to be the Transport Authority, and they've just published on Monday their corporate plan, and they have this really strong ambition around transport, because of course their role is, the devolved powers to them are really about growth and regeneration, unlocking growth and regeneration, and they are responsible for transport alongside housing and other skills and employment themes. And they want, I quote in their 10-year ambition, we want the region to be a national exemplar for rural mobility, sustainable tourism and transport-led growth and regeneration. So I think there's a lot of opportunities if we can bring this lens to their work as well. So thank you. Pass on to Chris.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me here. So I'm Chris Smith, so the Integrated Public Transport Manager at Devon County Council. I'm still fairly new in the role, so I joined the council in August. Previously I was with TFGM, and prior to that my background is probably more with operators, so particularly in the West Midlands with National Express West Midlands, who are probably the equivalent to Stagecoach in the West Midlands and being the largest operator there. I thought first of all it's probably just useful just to give you a brief overview of what falls under my remit within the team. So first of all we've got the concessionary travel team. So they deal with all the applications and issuing of the concessionary travel passes for those with disabilities and those over the pension age. They're also in the background do the work with the operators in terms of the financial payments to them associated to those. Also got the community transport arm, so I'm sure many of you will know Karen Rose in here, so obviously that's all to do with supporting and assisting the providers. We work very closely with Tim and several other people in this room, so in terms of bringing ride type schemes and that sort of thing. And then we've got what I probably consider the core public transport team. And before I touch on that, it's probably just worth, and again, I apologise for some of you, you'll be well aware of all this. Bus services fall into two categories in general. So since deregulation, they're either operated on a commercial basis, in which case the operator takes all of the risk, or if a service is not deemed to be commercially viable, then the council or the local transport authority, obviously in this case Devon County Council, can step in and fund that service where it's deemed necessary. And it's interesting stat is that there's just 4 services in the whole of Devon that don't receive some form of subsidy in one form or another. And next year, based on the initial figures, we're expecting to be spending 19.85 million, and so just shy of 20 million on subsidised bus services across Devon. It's probably worth mentioning then, so within the public transport team, we've got a team focusing on the design of the network and then tendering those routes out. So obviously you'll see, as an example, you might have recently heard, there's been a recent tendering exercise for January, where some routes will be changing operators as a result of that tendering process. We also look after the day-to-day operations, so making sure that essentially the contractors of those services are doing what they should be doing, running reliably, the correct vehicles, and as you'd expect, and also in that things like diversions and arranging when we're unable to serve a village due to a diversion, ensuring that there's a taxi service that's put on to provide those connections. And also we look after the publicity and the infrastructure, so the bus stop timetables, in partnership with Stagecoach in certain circumstances, and the shelters. So it's probably worth mentioning that since COVID, that we have received a lot more government support for bus services. That historically has been through what's been called BC, the Bus Service Improvement Plan, and we have received quite a substantial sum of money, not quite what we wanted, we did want more, which has allowed us to provide additional services over the past few years. Examples probably include 164, down Totnes, down towards Kingsbridge, the 118 here, Oakhampton up to Tavistock, or down to Tavistock, and also in North Devon, where we've increased the 309 and 310 service, and in some of those cases we've increased the frequencies, they've doubled up to hourly services in some services, and we've seen some real positive growth in some of those services are operating with passenger numbers at 60% of the pre-COVID numbers. So there's some real success stories there. That funding now is limited, and that basic funding finishes in April, and as it currently stands, and got one eye on the budget that's going on at the minute, we don't currently know what funding we're going to have from the government from April. Now, we're not expecting anything too dramatic in terms of changes there, but we were promised this funding information back in the summer. It's kept being pushed back and back and back and back. That makes it very hard to plan, because at the moment there is a risk, albeit a small risk, that we could be in a position, worst case, of having to make cuts come April, because the budget might not be there. Now, we hope not to be in that position. There is, a bit of wriggle room. We could equally be in a position where we've got a bit more money. We genuinely just do not know at this moment in time, but we are expecting to find that out in the next week or so, hopefully. But we've been told that many times. But just to set the scene there, I'm not trying to be negative by saying that, but just being realistic in the position that we are in at the moment. Probably also worth mentioning our enhanced partnership. So that involves many stakeholders, obviously the Stagecoach on that. We've also got elected officials, members from the GWR, for example, and rail services, many internal stakeholders from within the council, so our highways colleagues and whatnot. And I think it's fair to say that that is working positively. I'm not saying that everything is perfect and hunky-dory by any means, but I think there is that real close collaboration at the moment within the council, primarily as well, because that's sometimes taken for granted, that the working relationship within the council, within the highways teams, the bus services, but also with the operators, in making sure we are delivering the best service that we can for our residents, and appreciating that not everything is perfect out there. That there are still probably gaps in the network where if money, if we did have the money, we would like to increase the services in certain areas. I don't agree entirely with what has been said earlier. That there are essentially gaps in the network, and if you have that funding, then we would be able to provide those to there. So yeah, I think that primarily is what I was going to say. I know, Peter, you've got something.
One of the challenges of being as tall as I am. Right, very good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me along to Bridestowe Village Hall this afternoon. As already been introduced, my name is Peter Martin, I'm the Managing Director of Stagecoach South West. Just for a little bit of context for you all, although we are the largest operator of bus services in the South West and in Devon, we are not the only bus operator in the South West or Devon, but I do appreciate that we represent about 90% of the market in Devon in particular, which we're very proud to be part of the community. I live in Devon myself, and I think it's just really important that we also recognise that of the 500 vehicles that we operate on our network, they're all staffed and supported by 1,300 dedicated colleagues who are all part of our community as well, in well-paid, respectable jobs that provide for their families as well. So behind our bus service, there's also the people that operate it and support it and deliver it every day, and we all come to work every day to do the absolute best that we can for our community. But I do absolutely appreciate that, sometimes things don't always go well. Sometimes it's within our control and sometimes it's not within our control. But I'm sure we'll get on to some of that based on some of the questions that have kindly been provided a bit later on. I think it's really important to say as well at the outset that although we're a bus company, we can't do this on our own. We need to work in partnership. And we want to work in partnership. I'm very proud to work in partnership, particularly with Devon County Council and the elected officials. And Chris mentioned the Devon Bus Enhanced Partnership and the Bus Service Improvement Plan earlier on. And fresh from where me and Chris were in London yesterday afternoon, the Devon Bus Enhanced Partnership was recognised at the UK Bus Awards yesterday and came second nationally. So some national recognition for all of the hard work that has gone into improving bus services and bus service delivery in this part of the world. I think it's also worth saying another piece of news hot off the press this morning is that Devon saw the highest passenger growth of anywhere in the United Kingdom for the 24-25 financial year. of a 13% increase in customers, passengers using services within Devon, not just Stagecoach, but any operator. As I say, the best in the UK, and I think shows we do a very good job with the tools that we've got in what is a very, very rural area in places, but actually most of our network is geared around Exeter and the towns that surround Exeter. And those of you that go to Exeter regularly will know that it's a very small and beautiful city with a Roman road network that has 3 roads in and 3 roads out, and is extremely fragile. The kind of the road network ecosystem, which absolutely causes impacts as far as Dartmouth, Totnes, even run up into North Devon, because our buses are using that road network to get in and out of Exeter. So just a little bit of context and a bit of reality there. But I come back to that 13% increase in passenger growth, the best in the UK, I think shows the power of what partnership working can deliver. I want to move on just a little bit now to investment. Do recognise that the bus fleet is getting old in the southwest. Average fleet age of 13.4 years, which is relatively old for the intensity of the mileage that we deliver. However, some of you will be aware that there are 110 electric buses that have now been delivered to Stagecoach South West that will be entering service shortly. That's a £35 million investment in our business. And although there is a top-up amount that has been provided by the UK government, 35 million, as I say, is private investment, and I would challenge any of you in this room to find another business that is investing £35 million in a rural economy and county such as ours here in Devon. And what's more, there will be further investment in electric vehicles as we go further down the line. Some of you may be sat there wondering, what's he come to talk to us about electric buses for in this very rural part of the world? It all has a knock-on impact, and some of the newer vehicles that are maybe in Exeter or Barnstable or wherever will be cascaded out onto some of the more rural routes. So, there will be newer buses delivering some of our more rural routes. I'd like to just finish with a bit of recognition really of the challenges that rural geography has. It is very expensive to deliver services in rural areas. That's not just bus services, that's healthcare, that's education, that's all sorts of opportunity. And I know that the Cabinet Member for Rural Affairs is with us today, who has sort of very much heard my narrative and discussion points around this. But I was very sort of taken with the £70 return taxi fare. And it's eye-watering, isn't it? But we need a volume of customers to generate fair income that keeps the buses on the road, in partnership with any subsidies that are available from Devon County Council. But what I'm just urging you to consider is that £70 taxi fare for one person. Sometimes some of these buses only have 3 or 4 or 5 people on them that are paying a maximum of £3 each way. So, the economics of all of this are extremely difficult and are extremely challenging. And I don't wish to be negative, but I just need to provide you with some context of what we're dealing with here. So I think that's really all I wanted to say, but I will kind of conclude by saying that we're extremely proud of the journey that we've been on in partnership with Devon County Council.
A number of examples very close to us here in Devon where there hasn't been the level of funding, commitment or diligence, in my view, by the local transport authorities in protecting and maintaining the bus network. I'm not referring to Cornwall, but our neighbours further north and further east, in particular, have seen their rural transport networks decimated, to be honest with you. The rural bus network in Devon is extremely well developed for where we are comparatively to our kind of comparator counties in southern England and Scotland in particular. So although it might not cater to every single person's needs, I do encourage you just to reflect on the fact that we're in a much better position than elsewhere comparatively at this moment in time. I'm going to start going through the bullet points on this slide that's in front of you. So how can East Devon students access post-GCSE education? I think this particular question came in the context of Seaton, bearing in mind that East Devon is quite a large geographical area. And again, I'm going to mention Devon County Council and Chris here in that the network beyond Sidmouth is tendered, so it is supported and funded by Devon County Council. And as a result, it is Devon County Council that have the control over the timetable design, when it's going to operate, what specification of vehicle it's going to have, the volume of service and all of the rest of it. However, post-GCSE education is quite a hot topic at the moment because of the sixth form centre closures or reorganisations, and some of you will be aware of the ever-growing kind of multi-academy trusts that are popping up and then consolidating their post-GCSE, post-16 provision on one site. And I think what we would be calling for as Stagecoach is a little bit more joined up thinking from those education providers, because it is not just our responsibility to ensure that all the dots are connected. Other organisations, again working in partnership, also have a responsibility to ensure how they're going to get their learners, in this case, or their patients if it's a hospital, to and from their facilities. And it is sometimes rather disappointing that when facilities are consolidated into a major town or the village surgery closed or what have you, that there is often not that cognizance or attention paid to how people are going to get there by public transport, and most importantly, who's going to fund it. Is there anything you wanted to say on that before?
Not a great deal more, in fairness. I think it's probably worth just going back to the very original start of that with the money. Do entirely agree. If we want to increase more, we need the funding to do that. I think it's also important to say that with the funding.
Could you hold the mic a bit nearer, please?
All right. Yeah, it is with the funding is that there's no point, in just a one-off funding for a year or so, because ultimately you're going to end up with that cliff edge at the end of it. We know we're not in a position where any of these routes are going to be financially viable or sort of commercially viable at the end of it, so it needs to be a continuous long-term funding solution. Otherwise you do just end up with just these short-term things. And in fairness to the government, when I did mention earlier, in terms of the basic funding, the replacement to the basic scheme, that will be coming as a 3-year settlement when we do finally find out about it, rather than the 1-year ones that we have been having, which at least gives a little bit of certainty for the next few years there. Just touching on Seaton as well, so as part of the basic funding, we did also add the expertise service into Seaton, which does provide a slightly more direct routine, appreciated not completely direct. That was extended also to include beer on the peak journeys earlier this year. But yes, do accept that it's not the quickest of journeys into Exeter from Seaton at the minute, although I think the options to speed it up, so to given the relative demand, are probably quite limited in terms of the costs that would then for a peak vehicle. So obviously, as you can imagine, school times, college times is the peak time when vehicles are all out and resources very scarce. The cost of providing a vehicle, the cost of providing an 8 o'clock route on a direct service from Seaton, let's say to Exeter, will be a lot more than providing a 10 o'clock route when you've got vehicles that have come off the stalls and whatnot that are available at that time. So that's just something to consider there.
Certainly, Sarah, would you like that? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just, I'd like to, because this is around more inclusive and equitable travel. So yes, just as I was saying about using intelligence to target our these low-income households and areas where there's a high proportion of low-income households, using that transport poverty intelligence to target whatever limited resources we have, I think would be really important. But there were some other questions around scheduling of appointments. So an appointment at 9 o'clock, if you've got to come from a very long distance into an appointment at 9 o'clock. So there's a piece of work that's going on to look at whether it's possible to schedule these appointments at a better time of the day, like in the middle of the day, so you've got time to get there and to get back with the bus services. So that's a piece of work that's just happening now. And I think there was a piece that we were talking about with the combined county, with Tim actually, the combined county authority meeting about this, around information. We all know Google Maps, you type in from here to here and these are your options, but wouldn't it be amazing if we could also have in that something which also adds in all of the other options, because it's really about, we can't all have a bus every hour from every place, but can we connect the things that we do have to places where there are buses, and then making that join up of information and voluntary schemes into a really excellent source of information could be really transformative, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
As panel chair, I have a particular question that I'd like to ask, which relates to the final point here. How can people plan journeys with confidence when bus services are cut without notice, undermining integrated transport? But I can tell you, and my colleagues, my neighbours here will, I hope, appreciate my asking. Our bus service from Stagecoach, we have 2 bus services, are due to end on the 4th of January, I believe. We just hear this on the grapevine. Now, January 4th isn't very far away. I personally have had to plan a journey, and it was all predicated on being able to get to the bus station, St David's, to catch the train, and home to St David's to catch the train. Well, when is somebody going to tell us who is going to be providing the service after January 4th? And I'm sure I'm not alone, that there are other communities in a similar position. But this is now, where are we, November 25th, 26th. January 4th isn't very far away. There are people that need to plan hospital appointments, dental appointments, and so on. There's no information.
Yes, so if I explain that one, so as a commercial, well, any service, an operator can give their notice that they want to withdraw or come off that route with 70 days notice, which is in this case what Stagecoach did. In fact, it was just over 70 days, I believe, so a little bit higher. Following that, obviously we know that is a service that we can't just withdraw. It's probably also worth saying that we did go on the service, we've done observations on it, and having previously come from a commercial operator, to be quite honest, I'm surprised you're not withdrawing it earlier, because I can see why the cost to Stagecoach of that service is
it doesn't turn up. People can't rely on it for appointments, so they don't go, they find another way. And when they get there into the town, there's a big sign that says, "Don't use your car, use the bus."
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't give a specific example, I can't dive into the specifics of there, but I think we'd all agree that you should have faith in being able to use your bus service. You should have faith it will turn up. So in terms of the operator changes, and they are available now on our website, I think very shortly on the Stagecoach's website. There's also a press release from the local newspapers, which I believe was answered last night, so that should be out in the public domain now. So the replacement service for 66 will be operated by Dartline, are replacing the majority of journeys on the 6A. It is to enhance 2-hourly frequency throughout the daytime, and there are extra early morning journeys into Oakhampton, which have been requested onto there. So we're saying Stagecoach will continue to operate the college time journey on the route, so the sort of 4:35 I think it is from Exeter, and the journey getting in for around 8:30 on there. So that information is out there. We also plan, obviously, conscious that with the operator change and the timetable change that we do intend to do ad stock notices as well in the next week or so, which will be appearing on that route.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah. Something about point 2.
Certainly.
So what is being done to provide transport solutions for vital appointments? Car schemes do a lot of this. So crucial next steps, we've been very lucky. We're working in partnership with DCT. We've got a little bit of funding to get some more volunteers. There's also partnership work going on in Northern Devon, which hopefully will do the same, a bit more growth, more drivers, more people going to where they need to go. Part of the problem we have with inclusivity is the older you get, the less likely you are to be able to use the internet. So part of what we do is to try and share information in a way that can be shared on paper, even though unfortunately it has to start on the internet. So I just thought I'd show you that we have on our North Devon Voluntary Services page, we have tried our best to find alternatives to bus, also information about buses. North Devon, East Devon and southern areas. This is all available on our website. It can be downloaded as a PDF, and hopefully you'll find a local group that would be able to help. There's no guarantee or promise, but it is there. If you'd like that, if you'd like to take some of these, you are very welcome. There's also the hospital travel claims scheme, which is done by the NHS. For those in receipt of certain benefits going to secondary care, you can get your costs back, which if you're in North Devon and you're going down to Derriford, even a volunteer car, that's £100 return, and you can claim it back either on the day in cash or within 3 months by post, which again creates its own issues because they're big forms to fill out, and they are means tested, but it is something that's available for those. And also there is regular transport, so if you are going for regular treatment, chemotherapy, radiography, dialysis, then there is NHS transport provided. It's not always easy to find or easy to get to, but I've printed out some leaflets that's got all the information on it, and I'm more than happy to send more. My email is around here somewhere. I'll happily write it down and send you all the information that you need. But if you know anybody who would like to do a bit of driving,
Can I add to that?
Anderson. Oh, I said we would leave questions
No, I
till
just
the
want
end.
to add to what
A
Tim
very
just
quick
said.
one.
Because there's a very good service with Sea Change who are providing transport for cancer patients at the moment. So and that's free of charge as well for East Devon residents. So they provide transport to the hospitals. And
I don't
that's all.
think I know about those. Can we chat later?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm slightly, if we're going to aim for a tea at 2:30, we've got to get through a lot of questions. I think the next slide is very much for Chris. It is a major concern, and we all, if we drive around Devon, see huge housing developments going on. How infrastructure, not just transport infrastructure, but today is our focus is on transport. How are you responding to all of these developments, and how can we be reassured that they will meet community need? Is that taken into account at the earliest possible stages?
Yes, so it is a little bit disjointed, perhaps, is probably the best way to describe this at the minute. So obviously planning sits with the local authority, the district councils, whereas obviously the transport obligations then sit with the county councils in this case. So I would probably say we have better relationships with certain districts than others. But yes, so generally what we try to do is from the developers is get some Section 106 funding. The issue is sometimes the demands for that Section 106 funding can be quite conflicting, so it may be, in some cases you might want to improve the road infrastructure, at the same time you want to put a bus route on, and there's a limit to how much funding is available. From those, we will always fight to make sure that we get for the bus services to those, but we do have challenges. So there's a particular development just north of Bideford at the minute, which has gone in. With that, there is now Section 106 funding for bus services, and then there's some in the future, but sort of the threshold before it's released is really quite high, and it's going to take still several years away before that goes into play, and that does present us with challenges because obviously we want to provide people with a bus service there, but equally, we need the funding to be able to do that. Historically, the policy, if you like, at the county council was that we would not provide, and again this is quite historical, sort of was that we would not provide a bus service to a new development on the basis, presumably of trying to encourage the Section 106 funding, because it's a bit chicken and egg. If we keep just putting on the bus service, they're going to not bother. Why do they need to pay the Section 106 sort of thing for it? But yeah, I do agree that is something that does need to be taken into account, and we do probably need to improve going forwards. Again, as probably didn't really go into too much on, obviously the combined county authority from April officially become the local transport authority from that date, and that should hopefully allow for some increased collaboration, I think, on that, and probably a bit more joint thinking, so that is probably a positive that should be coming from that.
Thank you. The next question mainly focuses on Oakhampton Interchange, which has got to be wonderful news for an awful lot of rural residents in that part of the world. Peter and Chris, maybe, and Peter, what bus services will serve the new Oakhampton Interchange station? Will existing routes be revised to maintain links with the current station? And what plans are in place to ensure maximum bus-train connectivity when Oakhampton Interchange opens, including revised routes and timetables? Who wants to go first?
Yes, so we are planning as best as we can to ensure that link to the rail services is there. As we've sort of alluded to earlier, and we have been asked this question, very popular question this is that we've had over the past few months, and understandably why. And at the moment, pending our funding position from April, we just aren't in a position to guarantee any particular services that will be serving that interchange. Now, obviously, there is a limited amount of Section 106 funding, which is actually for one of the developments just up the road from the interchange, rather than directly associated with the interchange. So something will serve the interchange. I can guarantee you that. Exactly which services and the scope of which ones at this stage, we don't know. There's several different options being looked at, but pending the funding position, sort of we can't commit at this stage to multiple different services. And I would love to finally give you an answer on this, because as I said, it's been asked many times over the last few months. And probably in fairness, we probably have said, oh yeah, we're due to get the funding announcement shortly, which is what we've kept being told. But yeah, there's no point building an interchange if you can't interchange there. So,
Is there consideration being given for people that might live in Merton, Meath, Belstone, and so on, so that there is some bus service that gets them to the station?
Yes, so I think the priority of any services that do serve the interchange will be ones who currently don't have a link to the rail network. So again, even if it's the 118 as an example, sort of obviously that probably has less rail links than some of the other areas, although equally coming down from Holsworth in that direction. There's also the questions there. But yeah, we are looking at many different options on there. I know in one of the questions, I'm not sure if it's actually actually on the slide, there's talk of the 317 extension in Oakhampton Town, where it carries on up to there. There is reference that that is poorly used, but when we went, we have actually recently done some passenger counts out on the 317, and even though it is one stop, and you know, we're not talking about hundreds of numbers, but on the one journey I did on it, and across the team, we spread it out, we had 6 people get on at Waitrose just to go to that one stop. I was planning to jump off in town and was just going to have a quick drink in lemonade in Wetherspoons before jumping back on the bus. But I thought, no, I'm actually going to keep on, because I didn't believe all these people were literally just going the one stop up the hill. But yeah, they did. And I think this is part of the challenge, going back to the continuous funding, is once you put a link on and people do start using it, it's very hard to then remove that link, whether you believe it should exist or not. So that is a challenge to try and best not rob Peter to pay Paul in some circumstances.
Peter, have you got anything that you'd like to add to this?
Obviously, we've covered already that Stagecoach won't be operating the 6A between Exeter and Oakhampton beyond January, but we obviously do operate the 6, which is Bude to Oakhampton, and the 118, which is Tavistock to Oakhampton. And I think really our line on this is, we'll work collaboratively with Devon County Council, to amend the services as they wish and see fit, noting that all of those 3 service numbers that I've mentioned, whoever they're operated by, are contracted and tendered by Devon County Council.
Okay, moving on. Information and customer service. How can service providers ensure that there is accessible, adequate and reliable information for passengers? I think that's, yes. How can we ensure that passengers have access to adequate information? And I think that's sadly lacking at the moment. And somebody noted earlier, it is older people, I think Tim mentioned it, who don't often have access to the internet. I know Teambridge recently stopped publishing their bus timetables, where other district councils still do. If you're an older person and you don't have access to internet, I don't know how you're supposed to know what the timetable is, short of trotting up to the bus stop and writing all the bus times down and hope that they don't change suddenly before you've had an opportunity to use them. But there is also an issue about departure gates signs at, I know, Exeter bus station and bus stops. And I think we can probably all cite examples where you've stood at the bus stop, your app says the bus is coming, the bus doesn't show up, or you're at Exeter bus station, the display above the gate says this bus is going to stop in, I don't know, various stops from A to M. And in fact, I was told personally that Devon County Council controls the rolling signage in Exeter bus station, and so the people actually operating information services there have no control over it whatsoever. Any suggestions as to how things can be improved?
Yes, so if we touch on the Exeter bus station first. So Exeter bus station, a bit of a confusing relationship. So the bus station in Exeter is owned by the Exeter City Council and operated by Stagecoach. Now, the screens take the feed from the real-time information system, which is Devon County Council. Now, that is based on what it should be doing, that is not a live system. It is not, so in terms of, you can't change the stop that the bus is going from, because the system, the file that is feeding the system says it goes from stand A, and the system is not clever enough to know that it's going to go from stand C today, or stand 3, the number, and at the interchange, and that is, I don't think there is a system in terms of taking the real-time feed that can physically change the stand in the dynamic.
I have to say, the word integrated is sadly lacking here. And I mean, you know, at the very basis, it costs money to provide services. It costs an awful lot less to provide reliable information. And if you can't even get the reliable information, when you're actually at the stand, at the bus station, you cannot get reliable information about where the bus is going and when it's leaving, if it's leaving from that stand. And also, if you're standing at a bus stop, you can't get reliable information about whether that bus is going to turn up in 15 minutes or in 2.5 hours' time. That's pretty basic.
Yeah, and that is fair enough. So in terms of the real-time system, then that should be accurate. If the bus is operating, then that should be accurate. There are times where the real-time systems can continue sort of a phenomenon called ghost buses, sort of where if for whatever reason, let's say that bus has gone into Exeter bus station, let's pretend that the driver for the next part isn't there, or whatever, the system still assumes that the bus is going to carry on doing what it can do. You can, I believe, manually input that cancellation, if it is a cancellation. But what can confuse sometimes is if the vehicle gets swapped over in the bus station, even though the next bus is still on, the system sometimes can be tracking the wrong bus in that scenario if the previous driver hasn't logged on. And again, there are limitations to the system, and there are quite a number of human interactions that need to take place to make sure that it does work as accurately. I know it is something that, as part of the VSIP, we are working very closely. We've got a bloke at WSP, Henry, who we work very closely on the real-time information.
You said WSP, sorry, that's jargon I don't understand.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes. So WSP is there, sort of a specialist transport, ultimately probably consultants, but in this case it's a specialist in real-time information who works there, sorry. But yeah, I do agree, you know, as you said, we have all been there. We have seen when real-time isn't accurate. Again, it's something that should be accurate. Again, and I'm not saying this is an excuse, I think wherever else I've been around the country, probably have exactly these same discussions about real-time information and it not being very accurate necessarily. But yeah, it is something that we are looking at.
When real-time information can be the difference between 15 minutes and 2.5 hours, I think it's slightly more concerning. But, that said, let's move on to the next question, which I think falls firmly to Peter. Information and customer services. What methods are used by bus operators to carry fixed frame bikes and provide secure storage at pickup points? And I think we've probably covered the first point. The provision to carry bikes.
So, provision to carry bikes. Not a particularly prevalent solution in the UK to that at the moment. Very, very prevalent in North America, particularly in Canada and the United States. It's not a stagecoach kind of issue, it's more of an industry-wide issue and we need a solution to this. Many of you that have travelled extensively, maybe in Canada or the United States, will have seen self-loading bike racks fitted to the front of vehicles. And you can imagine the various risk factors that carries with it, I'm sure. And in the kind of society that we live in at the moment, there's got to be a wider national debate as to how that's going to work. The legislation also at the moment does not permit attachments to the front or rear of vehicles without upgrades to lighting, upgrades to the vehicle's type approval. You know, we're getting into kind of real detail around vehicle licensing here that I'm not particularly familiar with. But unfortunately, it is not as simple as just attaching a bike rack to the front or back of your bus and putting bikes on. But what I do agree with is that there is a need for that.
Going to be able to get across to that living time within that initial contract, within that time. So yeah, basically, if you do get in touch, and we're always happy to look at these options. and see what is possible.
Great, thank you. I think we're actually just about on time. Have we got a minute or two, maybe, to take any questions from the floor? Oh my gosh. Okay. I thought this might be opening up a can of worms. Can you keep them quite succinct and maybe address them to particular members of the panel the particular member of the panel that you think is most relevant? The gentleman here, and tell us quite loudly what your question is.
Chris and the gentleman from Stagecoach.
Chris and Peter, yeah.
In Oakhampton, in January, we start Men's Gasworks that closes one section of the road and will make Oakhampton a ghost town, right way through till February. Last time this work took place, it took me 3 weeks to get the notifications of where the bus routes went for the diversion routes, and people were still not sure where they could get off the bus. Are we going to see a faster interchange on that? And just to move on very briefly, looking at the way that the bus service for the interchange, the smaller buses, the 118 service, if they were made to circle the town and turn around using that interchange, you'd be able to service the schools, which would increase your productivity and your usage at certain times of the day. So that would make it more, maybe slightly more viable.
Right, I'm going to just paraphrase that so that other people in the audience who possibly didn't hear the question can hear. First of all, gasworks that are upcoming in Oakhampton, who will do what to minimise the disruption that is likely to take place? And in the second part was about a rerouting to incorporate the interchange and other facilities like the college and schools along the way, if it's possibly rerouted.
Yeah, so on the 118, that is one of the options that is being looked at, that particular scheme. In terms of the gasworks, I'll double check my emails. There was some emails flying around about it and discussing the diversion route earlier this week. So we are aware well in advance this time, so we will aim. It will probably make sense for us to combine that publicity with the service change stuff that we're planning to do at the bus stops in the next couple of weeks. Obviously appreciating that will have impact the 6A, but yeah, we should allow.
You know his name, you know where to find him. Good luck.
I'll do it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's very useful. I think the Tedburn St Mary contingent are going to be either directly in touch with the landowner with the trees, or we'll get out there with our loppers. Yes, this gentleman here.
Quick question. Why does the number 1 Tavistock to Plymouth bus no longer serve the railway station? Stagecoach operated service.
It is
a supported service?
No, not supported.
Not supported.
Entirely combined. So the service came out of Plymouth railway station from the end of August, from the 1st of September timetable change. Those of you who've used that service will know it only serves the railway station in one direction. And that's inbound, or it was serving the railway station in only one direction, coming into the city from Tavistock. Some of you will also be aware that Plymouth City Centre is currently a building site, and we keep being moved from pillar to post with stock reallocations, as well as delays getting into and out of Plymouth. In order to keep the service reliable for the majority of people, noting that the service was only serving the railway station in one direction and being used by a small amount of people following the survey work that we did, we took the decision to take it out to the railway station for the duration of those works. We are currently looking at what we can do to ensure that there is a service that goes into the railway station in both directions when Plymouth City Council finish the building work in the city centre, which we understand to be April. So a number of kind of challenges that we were facing. We want to serve the railway station, but it needs to be done properly in both directions as opposed to the previous setup, which was neither really particularly passenger friendly or generating much.
Thank you.
Right, there's a lady in the third row back.
Yes, my question's regarding funding. the bus service and Stagecoach, I presume does this as well as Plymouth Bus, go into the unitary authorities. Does County Council or the bus company get any funding from those unitary authorities because they are using the same roads that go in and out of those authorities?
So generally speaking, there's not, in certain cases where some services are cross-boundary, so for example the 306 here, that is jointly funded by ourselves and council in that case, but in terms of Plymouth, there are some services which are jointly funded between us and them in that case.
Right, I think our last question, Anderson, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. Is it, I've got the name of the Chief Executive Stagecoach.
Peter.
Peter, thank you. There was a question earlier about complaints, and I've raised complaints with your organisation, but it didn't get anywhere, to be quite frank with you. I think there's a culture of apathy towards the customers when they make a complaint, and my own personal experience recently is I explained to your representative that they'd just broken GDPR, and on that note, they put the phone down, cut the phone call. So that indicates to me that your customer service agents are really not taking their job seriously and doing what they should be doing. And just before I finish, on a positive note, I travelled on the 9A bus last week from Seaton to Exeter, and there was a driver on there, his name is Joe Turner, exceptional service. Everyone that was on that bus was greeted kindly, warmly, on and off the bus. That is a kind of service that is really good, and I took note and said to him that I'll be talking to you today and I'll praise him.
They all like the I'll tell Peter night. But I'll come on to the complaint point in a bit. I'll just deal with the first bit. And thank you for the positive feedback. I'll make sure I speak to colleagues involved. One thing I will say, you know, I've worked all over the UK, and I can truly say that our team here in the South West really do come to work and want to do the best job that they can do. It's not always easy, as I've said and admitted, but you know, I'm extremely proud of everything that they do, because I know that they're extremely proud of serving their community in this very rural area in places. So thank you for that. With regards to the complaints handling, I'm very sorry to hear that. Our complaints are handled by a contact centre in Perth, in Scotland. I'd like to just catch up with you at the end, just so I can understand. Brilliant. Just to understand that. You know, if it was Peter Knight's bus company, the complaints handlers, the call centre would be based in my office in Matford, in Exeter. You know, connected to the community and understanding the geography. We're not in that place, and you know, that's. I hope my chief exec's not listening, but that's where we are. But let's just have a chat afterwards, and I'll make sure that I look into that one for you.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you.
Well, at this point, thank you all very much. There have been some challenging questions. I'm just really impressed at your knowledge of all of these individual bus routes, my God, and the fact that you've been riding on them, that you have time to ride on them is truly impressive. But I think it's interesting when, you know, we're being, not just nationally, internationally, being urged to think about sustainability and so on, and you know, it really does start to a huge extent on one's own doorstep, so you have a huge responsibility. But thank you very much, and thank you all, and thank you for your questions as well.